Chapter 1, Introduction to Writing. We're moving into section 1.2. We're going to focus on purpose, audience, tone, and content. During the writing process, it is helpful to position yourself as a reader. So imagine that you are about to read this essay. So you can ask yourself a couple of questions. First, why am I doing this? Why am I composing this essay? Am I going to tell a story? Do I need to compare and contrast something? Am I arguing something? So think about your purpose. Second, you're going to think about your audience, the individual or group whom the writer intends to address. Are you addressing your peers? Are you addressing a professor? Are you addressing a potential employer? You need to think about your audience because you're going to approach each audience differently. Whereas you may speak to your peers with slang and that sort of thing, you definitely wouldn't use slang with a potential employer. Third, we have tone, the attitude the writer conveys about the essay subject. And tone you can sort of think of as tone of voice, how you plan to slant the angle, how you want your audience to feel about something. First off, we have to think about identifying common academic purposes. In college writing, you're generally asked to write for 4 specific reasons. The first is to summarize, the second is to analyze, third is to synthesize, and then fourth is to evaluate. When you summarize, basically you're taking a large amount of information and you're going to condense it into your own words. It'll be shorter than the original piece of writing, but yet it should still contain all of the key points and key support of the original document. Analyze. Analysis separates complex materials into different parts, and then it tends to study how those parts relate to one another. We see this a lot in biology, anatomy textbooks. I give you the example here of simple table salt would require deconstruction of its part. You'd have sodium Na, then you would have your chloride, and basically you've taken this element apart and shown its simpler construction in order to understand it better. And then to synthesize. The purpose of an academic synthesis is to blend individual documents into a new document by considering the main points from one or more pieces of writing and then linking those main points together to create a new point, one not replicated in either document. So it's kind of like, I know this is the weirdest example on earth, but it's kind of like a baby. You have a mama, you have a daddy, and then you're using both of them, but then you get a brand new entity, and that is synthesis. Or you can use the boring old example here, a research paper. So you'll pull a source, perhaps you'll use Freud for one source, then you may use Carl Jung for another source, and then you will write a paper on the id, ego, and you'll use both, but the paper will be original to yourself even though you used the 2 other sources. Evaluation. An academic evaluation communicates your opinion and its justifications about a particular document or a topic of discussion. Now, when you evaluate something, it's going to automatically be influenced by your prior knowledge and your experience with the topic or issue at hand. Evaluations typically require more critical thinking and tend to be a combination of summary, analysis, and synthesis skills. So it marries all 3 of those together. Now, it is important to identify your audience. When you're thinking about audience, you have to think about the words you use, your tone, you have to think about slang, you have to make sure that you are using appropriate humor. In other words, be aware of the invisible reader at all times when you write anything. In order to help you identify the audience, I like to think of something, it's called the perceptual world. And it's made up of these 8 elements. And every single one of us, as individuals, we have our own perceptual world. And our perceptual world is made up of past experiences, education, professional experience, status, values, reference groups, social roles, and age. Let me go back. Past experience. For example, for past experience, if you are trying to convince somebody to join a softball league at church, if that individual that you are trying to convince has had a past experience where a softball has hit them in the face and knocked their 2 front teeth out, they are not going to be as open to joining the softball team as, say, somebody else who is a college athlete who plays softball on a traveling team and is just the bomb at it. So you have to think about past experiences. You're going to approach each of those individuals differently if you're trying to convince them. 2 is education. You have to think about the level of education that your audience has. Especially, for example, if you're trying to convince them to buy organic versus regular produce, you'll have to think about, do they understand what a GMO is? Do they understand the effect that pesticides have on the body? You'll have to think about these things. 3, professional experience. This is a tough one. If you're writing an argumentative paper on how you believe that the legal drinking age should be lowered to 18, you're going to have a much harder time convincing a police officer who has arrived on the scene of several underage drinking driving accidents than you would your typical average everyday Joe. For status, depending on if you're a renter or a homeowner, you may have a different opinion of a dump being built beside your home. So status plays a very important part. Values, these are the big ones. These are the ones that we all get super bristly about. Religion, your ethics, morals, things like that. You have to think about, if you're trying to convince somebody to do something or to change something, you have to be sensitive to those things. 6, reference groups. Those are basically who you rely on for guidance and information. So you have to think about, who do these people respect? Who do these people listen to? Is there a way that you can gear your argument to something that perhaps somebody that your audience, rather their reference group, has condoned a particular thing and you want that to occur as well? Then you can say, hey, by the way, so-and-so believes that this is a great idea. And they're like, oh yeah, that guy. I love that guy. I trust that guy. So reference groups are important. 7, your social roles. Social roles are important when deciding your perceptual world. For example, and this is a terrible example, but I'm going to use it because I think it helps to clarify the situation. When I was in undergrad in college, I rescued animals. Stray dogs were my drug of choice. And so whenever those terrible commercials would come on with Sarah McLachlan in the background, Arms of an Angel, that song, I couldn't bear it. I could not find the remote fast enough to change the channel. And it was because at the time, as an undergrad, my social role was dog parent. So those were the commercials that got me. But then the starving children would come on, that commercial would come on, and I would stop and I would think, oh my goodness, that is the most terrible thing in the world. I hope those children get help. But my social role wasn't a parent at that time. So really, until I had my daughter, which now I can't watch those terrible commercials because they break my heart. I can't even imagine a child anywhere not having enough food. When my social role changed, I became more sensitive to different things. So, as an audience, you have to, or rather, when you're writing to an audience, you have to think about their social roles. You have to think about what they are sensitive to, what they feel powerful and strong about, and what they're ready to change. Number 8 is age, and this is a big one. For example, people are a product of their time. They truly are. So you need to think about the age of your audience as well. So I hope that clarified that up a bit. Tone. We talked a little bit about tone in the first video. Basically, your tone identifies a speaker's attitude toward a subject or another person. Even though it's written word on the paper, if you use your words effectively, you can transmit emotion through voice. You can transmit a range of emotions and attitudes and feelings. And these emotions, they're the thing that connect your audience to the writer. And once you have that relationship, it's easier to convince people to change their minds about things. So keep in mind that the writer's attitude should always appropriately match the audience and the purpose. So you should always keep in mind who your audience is, what is important to them, what are their main concerns, and write for that particular goal.